All right, let's dive into The Way of Perfection
Sounds good to me.
by Saint Teresa of Avila.
Yeah.
She was, what, 16th century?
16th century Carmelite nun.
Yeah, Carmelite nun, right?
Mystic, yeah.
Mystic. And this book is essentially all about advice on deepening a connection with God.
That's right. Yeah. And I mean, it's written for, a specific religious audience, obviously.
Gives it to cars.
But I think the insights that she has in here, I think they're really relevant to anyone
Yeah.
who's trying to kind of find a more meaningful life, regardless of what they believe.
It's interesting, too, just glancing through the table of contents.
Yeah.
Some of these chapter titles
Oh, yeah, they're great.
are so intriguing.
Yeah.
Exhortations to nuns on keeping their rule.
Right.
Discussions on love for one's neighbor.
Yeah.
The importance of learned confessors.
Yeah.
There's some real meaty stuff in here.
Yeah.
Even the benefits of self-detachment. It's like
She gets right into it.
she doesn't shy away from the tough topics.
No, she doesn't. And what I think is really interesting is that she kind of blends these profound spiritual concepts
Yeah.
with this very down-to-earth, even humorous, writing style.
Right.
So, for instance, she's got this whole section where she's urging her nuns to pray for the church's defenders,
Okay.
theologians, preachers,
Yeah.
people that she sees as kind of,
Mhm.
battling this world
Right.
that's increasingly skeptical of faith.
But then she kind of turns around and calls out those who are praying for trivial matters.
Yes, exactly.
Like winning the lottery.
Yeah, or winning the lottery is like she says, I don't know, something like,
I mean, she's got a line where she's basically saying, like, the
yeah,
world's in chaos, People
Yeah.
are turning away from God and you're bothering him about getting rich.
really? It's like, come on, prioritize. Like, there are bigger battles.
It is a stark contrast, right?
Yeah.
But it highlights what she's really about.
Yeah. Which is like, this focus on
Right.
what really matters,
Yeah.
strengthening our spiritual core.
Yes.
Not getting caught up in, the material.
Especially in times of crisis.
Yeah.
Like, she seems to be saying, don't sweat the small stuff
Right.
when there are bigger battles to be fought, both within ourselves
Yeah.
and in the world,
And it kind of it begs the question for us today, right?
Yes.
Where are we
Yeah.
directing our own focus and energy?
Where is it all going?
I mean, it's
So many things pulling at us.
it's so easy to get distracted these days,
Oh my gosh.
especially with everything.
All the things.
But her advice, it's
Yeah.
like, take a step back and really think about, what are you putting first in your life?
I was just thinking, she was writing this centuries before
I know.
the internet,
Well,
before social media.
Imagine. Yeah, and yet she almost predicted these challenges.
Yeah.
The world just saturated with these distractions.
Yes.
So it makes it, what she was saying, it almost makes it more relevant,
Absolutely, yeah.
today.
And she keeps going. Like,
Yeah.
she doesn't just stop there.
Oh,
She talks about
she gets into, yeah.
different types of love.
Yeah. Like, the purely spiritual versus, the
Ugh.
kind that gets all mixed up with our
Yeah, with human weakness.
human emotions and weaknesses. Yeah.
And then even, navigating relationships with spiritual advisors.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
confessors, right?
Yeah.
It's almost like she's saying, yes, seek guidance.
Seek guidance, but
Yeah.
you're responsible for your own journey.
Right?
It's about
Yeah.
finding that balance.
And it makes me think, like, how do we know when we're seeking guidance
Yeah.
versus when we're becoming overly dependent?
That's a great question.
Especially in that realm, right?
Yeah,
Where there's so much trust involved.
absolutely. That's something, to think about.
Yeah, for
Very-
sure. We should come back to that.
Yeah.
But,
Speaking of trusting ourselves,
oh, okay.
that kind of leads into,
Yeah.
I think, one of her most powerful concepts,
Okay.
which is detachment.
Detachment.
And she's not,
What does she mean?
I mean, she's not just talking about giving up, chocolate for Lent or something.
More like giving up the whole chocolate factory, right?
Yeah, like yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
She's talking about detaching from, material possessions,
Mm.
anxieties, even our own egos.
Wow.
Like centuries before
Yeah.
minimalism became a trend.
Right.
She's basically outlining the principles of it.
Yeah.
And she believed, she really believed that, clinging to these things,
Yeah.
that's what keeps us from experiencing true freedom.
Yeah. I mean, it's easier said than done, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Like, how do we...
She doesn't pretend that it's easy. In fact, she's very open
Yeah.
about her own
Well, rebels with it.
struggles with it.
Yeah.
And one of the images that she that she uses,
Yeah.
which I love. She talks about, carefully bolting all the doors of her house
Okay.
to keep out thieves.
Okay.
And then realizing that the real thief, her ego, her desires, was already inside.
Wow,
It's such a striking image
it is.
because we often try to find peace,
By controlling the external
controlling
world.
all the external things.
Yeah.
But she's saying like, no, the real work
Yeah.
is internal.
It's the inner stuff.
It's much harder.
Yeah.
It's a much harder thing to do, and it's really relevant today.
It is.
I mean, when you think about all the information, all the distractions we have,
Yeah.
they're all feeding those
The inner thieves.
inner thieves.
It's like our minds have become these overflowing junk drawers.
Love that image.
Just full of all this
Yeah.
anxiety and to-dos and
Yeah.
all this stuff that we desperately need to declutter.
Yeah. It's like, and her teachings are a roadmap, I think,
A roadmap.
to do just that.
Okay.
Identify what it is that's
Yeah.
preventing you
The things that are clutter.
from connecting with yourself,
Yeah.
with something larger than yourself.
So there's this, I'm seeing this real theme of inner work here.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not just,
It's not about outward actions.
right, the rituals.
It's about
this inner state of being.
It's about cultivating a certain
Yeah.
inner state.
Yeah. And she also talks about humility.
Oh, yes.
And she doesn't see humility as weakness,
Yeah, I know.
but as understanding
She sees it as this.
your place in the universe, right?
It's a perspective shift, you know?
Yeah.
So it's like it allows you to pursue your goals, serve others without being burdened,
Yeah. Weighed down by ego.
weighed down by ego, by the need for validation.
So it's more about being grounded and clear-eyed.
Exactly. Than it is about being self-effacing.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
And then she makes this other really interesting distinction
Yeah.
about the types of people that there are on the spiritual path.
Yeah.
She talks about the actives and the contemplatives.
Actives and contemplatives.
She's not, I like that.
Yeah, she's not saying that
Yeah.
one is better than the other.
Right, that's good.
She's saying that both are needed.
It's like she,
Martha and Mary.
exactly. She
Yeah.
actually references the story.
Where Martha is
We both.
busy serving
Being
and Mary's at Jesus' feet,
Yeah,
listening.
And
It's that balance.
yeah, yeah.
And she's saying a spiritual community needs both.
Needs both.
So that's an invitation for us to think about
Excellent.
in our own lives, what
Are you more of a Martha,
right? Are we the doers? Are we more reflective?
focused on those outward achievements, or are you,
More drawn to that inner reflection?
or maybe a blend
And most likely you're
Yeah.
a beautiful blend of both.
of both?
But I think what's important is to recognize the value.
Yeah,
Yeah.
of each.
So she was a big proponent then of mental prayer.
Oh yeah.
Like,
She believed
thinking about
it wasn't about going to some far off monastery
Right.
to find God.
it's not about going to heaven.
She said, you don't have to go to heaven
Right.
because he's already within you.
It's about turning inward.
It's about turning inward.
Yeah.
And I love that she's so relatable
Yeah.
when she talks about her struggles
Just stay focused.
with prayer.
Yeah.
She wasn't superhuman,
Oh, she talks about her mind being like a wild horse during prayer.
Oh, wild horse.
I can so relate to that.
It
Sometimes I
is.
feel like
Yeah.
my to-do list is
It's like the to-do list is doing jumping jacks
Yeah.
in your head.
in my head while I'm trying to meditate.
And she compares
She gives this beautiful image though too.
the soul to a castle.
The soul as a castle,
Right.
like a place of safety,
this place of refuge.
protection from the world.
So it makes me
Okay.
think.
Yeah, in today's world, how do we
define that?
build that castle?
The castle.
Is it through meditation? Is it through
I think it's whatever works for you, whether it's meditation,
mindfulness? Yeah.
mindfulness, spending time in nature.
It's about
creating
in that
that-
space, the space to connect.
Yeah. So we've got detachment, we've got humility, we've
Yeah.
got this inner reflection.
Ah.
But how do we access that inner world?
Well, she believed
Yeah.
that the key was surprisingly simple.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
The Lord's Prayer.
Really?
Yeah,
That's it.
that's it.
Just the Lord's Prayer.
Yeah, she found more solace and wisdom in those words
Wow.
than she did in complex
Yeah.
theological texts.
It's like she's saying, don't overcomplicate it.
Don't overcomplicate it.
The truth is right in front of us.
It's right there.
But it's not just about reciting the words, right?
No, it's not about just rattling them off. You have
Yeah.
to understand them.
Yeah.
She emphasizes approaching prayer
With intention.
with intentionality.
So what are the prayers or the intentions
Yeah,
that we're repeating daily?
that you're repeating daily, whether formally or just in your mind.
I like that.
Do you really grasp the meaning of them?
That's good, yeah, because I think about all the
Yeah.
little mantras and affirmations I throw around.
Yeah.
Do I really?
Do you really
Is
understand
there
their power
power?
behind them?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I should think about that.
Yeah, it's something to ponder.
But I think one of the most interesting parts is
Yeah.
how she breaks down the phrase,
Yeah.
give us this day our daily bread.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
It's more than just asking for food, right?
It's more than just asking for, physical sustenance.
Yeah. What is she?
She sees it
I
as
like it in it.
a request for a daily dose of God's grace and
Yeah.
presence.
So it's,
No, she's saying don't
it's
get
the food we eat.
so fixated on
But the things we consume on all levels.
Aye.
Like, are we feeding our souls?
Are you feeding your soul?
Or are we just
filling a void?
filling a void?
So it makes you think about
Is that
what you're
so?
taking in each day.
It really does.
Right.
What is your daily bread?
What is it that we're
And are you seeking it out?
consuming? Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I know that a lot of her teaching is
Yeah.
deeply rooted in Christian theology.
It is.
And there's this section where she talks about receiving communion
Uh-huh.
as if welcoming Christ into your home.
Yeah.
And she even gives that anecdote about
Yeah.
a woman who prepared herself internally for communion.
Yeah. And even envisioned herself kneeling at Christ's feet like Mary Magdalene.
It's a very specific, image,
Yes.
but I think it speaks to
Get broader.
a broader principle, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is like, whatever your practice is,
Yeah.
whatever it is you do, are you approaching it with that
Intentionality.
intentionality?
Not just going through the motions.
and not just going through the motion.
So even if we don't share her specific beliefs,
right.
we can still take
Inspiration
from
That approach,
Yeah.
bringing that presence and awareness
Yeah,
to
exactly.
whatever rituals or practices we.
It goes back to that
Okay.
inner transformation.
It's not just the outward;
yeah,
it's the inner disposition.
it's the inner disposition.
But she wasn't all sunshine and roses when it
Yeah.
came to
Hmm.
spiritual progress,
I
right?
don't know.
Like she had some
Yeah.
pretty stern warnings
She had a lot to say about spiritual pride
about pride.
and
something.
mistaking fleeting feelings of piety
Right, exactly.
for true virtue.
Like mistaking those,
Yep.
for the real thing.
It's that moment when you trip over your own ego,
Oh, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
And she also cautioned, against thinking we've arrived.
Right,
It's like that's when
because we let our guard down.
we become vulnerable. Yeah.
We think, oh, we're good now, we got it,
Yeah.
and then that's when,
That's when you're most susceptible.
the subtle temptations creep in.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how do we
guard against it?
how do we not
Spiritual pride,
fall into that trap?
that thinking that we've got it all figured out.
Yeah, that's a great question.
I don't know.
And
I feel like that's something that she
do I need to explore it more deeper? Yeah.
Yeah.
So it seems like we've only just scratched the surface
I think so.
of the way of perfection.
Yeah.
There's so much to unpack here, and I'm already seeing
It's
Connections
from
to
my own experience
connections between her teachings
and my own life.
and your own experience.
And I have to admit, I'm finding her surprisingly relatable,
She is.
even though
She is, and I think that's
she was writing centuries ago.
the beauty of timeless wisdom.
It's true.
It speaks across generations, or
Uh-huh.
across cultures.
Well, I'm definitely intrigued to
Yeah,
learn more.
Yeah.
So for now, we'll take a pause
Let's take a pause.
here in part 1
Yeah.
of our deep dive.
And we'll pick up the conversation.
Yeah, we'll pick it up again soon. So, before we pause, we were talking about how easy it is to kind of, fall into that trap.
Yeah, that pride.
Yeah, the pride.
Thinking you've got it all figured out. Right. And she has some pretty interesting things to say about that. The idea that we can actually even use spiritual experiences
Right.
in a way that's, not
To boost our ego.
boosting our egos. Yeah.
Right.
So it's a very subtle form of vanity, I think.
It is.
That
Yeah.
can really kind of creep in
Yeah.
and derail us.
But
But it's
through
not-
that.
She warns about other things too.
Oh,
right?
yeah. She warns about a lot of.
Like becoming overly scrupulous.
Oh, yeah. She talks about, getting so obsessed with
Yeah.
the minor imperfections.
That we become paralyzed.
That you become paralyzed. Yeah. She has this point where she says that, the devil can actually use our anxieties against us.
Right.
So he makes us, not want to
Withdraw from practices like prayer.
pray, not want to receive communion.
Yeah.
Because we feel
unworthy.
So how do we deal with those inevitable moments when we do stumble?
Well, she says we have to shift our focus from our perceived failings
to God's mercy.
To his mercy.
Okay.
Remembering that he doesn't abandon us.
Right.
When we make mistakes.
Yeah.
And remembering that his love is bigger than our imperfection.
So it's kind of a relief to know that she wasn't advocating for some kind of harsh, self-flagellating approach to spirituality.
Yeah, in fact, she actually encourages cultivating what she calls a healthy fear.
A healthy fear
of God.
Of God.
Not a fear of punishment,
but
a fear of
offending him.
Offending him because we love him.
Because we love him, yeah.
It's like that,
Like disappointing a parent you respect.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, you don't want to let them down.
You don't want to let them down.
Yeah, because you value the relationship. Exactly.
So that kind of fear.
So it can be motivating, right?
It could be motivating.
It can actually urge us to live in a way that honors the relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah, but she also talks about the importance.
Being vigilant against even.
Yeah, being vigilant against even the small, the venial sins.
Why was that so important to her?
Well, because she believed that those seemingly insignificant acts of disobedience, even though they may not send us straight to confession, can still, they erode the relationship over time.
It's that I know this isn't right, but I'm going to do it anyway.
Exactly.
That in a way can be more telling.
Absolutely. It's a matter of the heart, right?
Than the bigger sins committed out of weakness.
Yeah. So shifting gears a bit.
Okay.
She also had some really interesting things to say.
Yeah.
About
the different way how we experience
God's love.
God's love.
Okay, so she even cautioned.
She cautioned against becoming too attached
to those intense feelings of spiritual joy.
Feelings of spiritual joy.
Well, even good feelings can be a distraction.
Yeah. She's.
That seems counterintuitive.
Yeah, it's easy to.
Isn't that a sign that we're doing something right?
Yeah, but she's saying that real, spiritual growth isn't about chasing those emotional highs.
It's about aligning our will with God's will.
Aligning our will with God's will.
Even when
it's difficult.
It's not blissful.
Even when it doesn't feel, blissful.
So it's about
think of it like this, like
staying the course.
People who are truly in love,
even when the initial
aren't always walking around
excitement fade
in a state of euphoria, right?
Right. Yeah.
It goes deeper than that. They're willing to.
They're committed.
Stick it out. Yeah.
It's the commitment.
It's the commitment.
So finding joy in the process, even when we don't.
I mean, when you don't feel
particularly devout
or inspired.
You're inspired. Yeah.
It's showing up. Doing the work. Yeah, it's about the consistency.
It's the consistency, yeah.
Not relying on those bursts of inspiration.
Right. It's that steady, disciplined practice.
And that ties into another really big theme.
It runs through her work, which is action.
Action. She was all about action.
She didn't just want to sit around and contemplate.
No, she believed that, our love for God.
It expresses itself.
And
how we treat others.
Yeah.
Actions speak louder than words.
Exactly. She talks about, actively seeking good.
Okay.
Supporting the
good.
Who are doing good in the world and standing up.
Standing up.
For what's right.
So how do her ideas about action challenge us today?
That's a good question.
Like, what does that look like in concrete terms?
Yeah.
How can we make a difference in our lives?
Yeah. How can we take
in our community
what she's saying?
Yeah.
And actually put it into practice.
Live it out. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a
good
question.
Thing to reflect on.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a good reminder.
It is.
That even though, her writings are obviously coming from.
There's a very specific.
Time and place.
The
wisdom is still.
But that the wisdom can still be so relevant and inspirational for us.
Speaking of inspiration.
Yeah.
She also had some interesting thoughts.
Yeah. What about fear?
Fear.
Yeah.
And particularly.
She talks a lot about that.
It's not
something you hear a lot about.
Yeah, it's not something that people talk about a lot. But
she didn't see it as
a
negative thing.
Right, as a negative thing.
Like, what was she?
In fact, she believed.
Yeah.
That a healthy fear of God is actually a sign of love.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Because when you love someone, you don't want to do anything to hurt them.
Right.
You don't want to disappoint them.
It's like that feeling of,
yeah, it's that,
I don't want to mess this up.
I don't want to mess this up.
Because
the relationship is so valuable.
Because I value it so much.
So it's not about
it's not about
being terrified of God's wrath.
Being terrified.
It's about
recognizing the immense value
of that relationship and wanting to protect it.
So it becomes
it can actually become a guiding principle.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and she distinguishes that from the fear of hell.
Right.
Which she saw as more, self-centered.
Yeah.
It's about shifting
the motivation,
the focus from avoiding punishment
to seeking
a deeper connection.
I'm seeing a theme here.
Yeah. And
she's encouraging us.
She's encouraging us to
move beyond
those
fear-based motivations and into this more love-centered approach.
Love-centered to spirituality.
And it ties into, what she says about freedom too.
True freedom, yeah.
She believed that, this detachment from worldly things is essential.
So it's not just about detaching from the negative things.
Negative.
Like anxiety or ego.
It's also about
detaching from things
that we might
perceive
see
as positive.
Material possessions.
Yeah, material possessions, status,
or even our own desires. Okay.
Because she saw those things as
what?
Ultimately limiting. Yeah.
Limiting in what way?
They limit our capacity for love.
Okay, it's almost like they're cluttering up our spiritual lives.
Yeah, it's like spiritual clutter that keeps us from
experiencing God's presence.
Yeah,
it's like we're trying to fill ourselves up.
Yeah, we're trying to fill ourselves.
Give ourselves to the wrong.
That will never satisfy.
Next things, exactly.
Yeah, so she's saying.
And that's where I think her teachings,
true fulfillment comes from
the nature of love, are so important.
Okay.
She makes this really clear distinction between
worldly love
and
true love. Okay, so what does she see as the difference?
Well, she sees worldly love as
often being conditional.
Yeah.
It's based on
what we can get from
the other person.
Yeah, what's in it for me?
Yeah, it's what's in it for me.
Yeah.
What can you do for me?
Versus this unconditional.
Versus, true love, which she says,
Yeah, I love you no matter what.
God's love is unconditional.
It's not about
self-giving.
It's not about what the other person can do for you.
But it's about wanting what's best.
Wanting what's best for them.
For them, yeah.
Even if
it costs you something.
Costs us something.
Right. So she challenges her readers to cultivate this kind of love.
To cultivate.
Yeah, in their own lives.
Okay, so how do we do that?
Well,
how do we cultivate this?
She was a big believer in the power of prayer.
Prayer?
Yeah, and she had some, pretty strong opinions about how we should approach prayer.
Okay, so she believed.
She didn't believe it should just be reciting words.
Reciting words.
It should be
a real conversation with God.
Not a one-way monologue.
Not a one-way, no.
So be honest and vulnerable.
Be honest. Be vulnerable.
Bring your whole self to God.
Bring your whole self.
The good, the bad.
Yeah, don't put on a show.
Not a show.
Yeah, have an authentic.
It's about being authentic.
Relationship.
Yeah, so show up as we are.
Show up as you are.
Imperfections and all.
Exactly.
And she saw prayer.
And she saw it as a way of,
as a way to
strengthening that bond.
Strengthening.
Deepening our understanding.
That
bond with God.
Of his will.
Okay.
Opening ourselves up to his grace.
But it shouldn't be.
And she also, she really emphasizes.
A solitary pursuit.
That it shouldn't be solitary.
Just wanted people to pray for each other.
Pray for each other, yeah.
Pray for the community.
Pray for the community.
Okay, so it's this.
It's like we're all part of this spiritual network.
And our prayers.
And our prayers can actually have
ripple effect.
A ripple effect.
Yeah.
I love that.
I love that image.
That makes it feel.
It makes it feel less solitary.
Less solitary, more like you're participating in.
Participating in something bigger.
Something much bigger.
Than ourselves.
Than yourself.
And also, prayer is not.
About getting.
It's not about getting.
What we want.
What we want, yeah.
It's about aligning our will.
Aligning our will.
With his.
Okay.
It's about surrendering.
Surrendering.
Trusting. Yeah.
Yeah.
That surrender piece can be tricky.
Oh, it's so hard.
It's about.
Especially for us today,
Letting go.
Yeah, and
trust about letting go of control.
And she talked
about creating this inner castle.
Yeah, she talks about this sanctuary.
Finding that quiet space.
Where we can connect with God.
Where you can just be.
About distractions. So in today's world, what does that look like?
Well, I mean,
how do we find that quiet corner?
She didn't have the internet.
Right.
To distract her.
Yeah. And
we have social media.
So much more pulling at us.
Right. So maybe it's finding a quiet corner in your home.
That inner sanctuary look like today.
Maybe it's going for a walk in nature.
Okay, yeah.
Maybe it's just
taking a few minutes.
A few moments of silence.
Of silence each day.
It's about creating.
It's about creating that space. However it looks for you.
However it looks for you.
Right.
So that makes me wonder, what are some ways you found...
What are some ways that you've created that inner sanctuary?
That inner sanctuary.
In your own life.
In your own life. That's a great question.
I know, it's a good one. And I think it's
one that deserves
some reflection.
Maybe we can revisit.
Reflections.
I guess we can revisit it.
Revisit it.
Later in our conversation.
A little later.
Yeah.
For now, let's take a pause.
Take a pause here.
You've part 2
of our deep dive
into the way of perfection.
Into the way of perfection.
So we're back, continuing our deep dive into Saint Teresa's The Way of Perfection.
Yes, picking up where we left off with this idea of creating this inner sanctuary.
This inner castle.
This inner castle, yeah, where you can kind of get away.
Escape the chaos.
Escape the chaos of the world and connect with something deeper.
And it's so hard these days with all the...
I know.
Everything pulling at us.
But she really seemed to understand this need.
She did, yeah.
For inner stillness.
Even back then. Centuries ago. You know?
It's like she knew we'd need this. Yeah, like she almost predicted it.
And that's where her teachings on humility,
really come in.
Right.
She saw it as really the foundation.
Okay, yeah.
Of all virtue.
Well, a starting point.
Yeah, like you can't really, make any progress spiritually.
Until you've got that.
Until you have that, yeah.
Okay, but she doesn't see humility as...
weakness.
Yeah. Or self-deprecation.
Right, it's not about...
No, it's about putting your...
recognizing our dependence on God.
Okay.
Acknowledging that we're not the center of the universe.
That is a real shift.
It is. It's a perspective shift.
It's letting go of that ego.
Letting go of the ego's need to be in control.
To have all the answers.
To have all the answers.
To always be right.
Yeah, and it's basically just acknowledging...
acknowledging that we need...
we're part of something bigger.
God. We need God.
We need God's grace, to really live a fulfilling life.
And that humility then allows us to...
It opens us up, right?
Yeah, to learn and to grow.
It makes us less...
to receive guidance.
Likely to be blinded by pride or self-righteousness.
To see others.
It allows us to see the truth.
With more clarity.
Even when it's challenging.
Yeah, because when we're coming from that humble place.
And to see the good in others.
It's not about being right.
Even when they're different from us.
It's about seeking the truth.
Exactly.
So I'm seeing how all of these things... humility, detachment, prayer, they're all part of this process of...
It's all part of this process.
Letting go.
Of letting go.
Of that limited, ego-driven perspective.
Of that, limited.
And opening ourselves up to...
And opening yourself up to something more loving.
More loving, yeah.
And that ultimately leads to a deeper experience of freedom. The kind of freedom
that St. Teresa believed
that she said
it was essential for true happiness.
Essential for true happiness.
But that freedom...
But it doesn't come with responsibility.
Right.
Like we have to be willing.
We have to cultivate it.
To choose it.
Yeah.
To cultivate it in our lives.
And that's where the action comes in.
Where the action comes in.
Right.
She wasn't a proponent of passive spirituality.
No, she was not.
It's about...
She believed that our love for God...
putting faith into action.
Has to be expressed.
Yeah.
About actively seeking good.
Yeah, actively seeking good.
Supporting those who are doing good.
Standing up for what's right.
Standing up for what's right.
Yeah.
Even when it's difficult.
Even when it's hard.
And she talked about...
I was also very real.
About the reality of temptation.
And the importance of being vigilant against it.
She cautioned us that.
The devil often uses our own
desires and weaknesses.
Against us.
And he knows our vulnerabilities.
He knows exactly where we're vulnerable,
And she was particularly adamant about...
And especially when
we're feeling strong.
Spiritually strong.
Especially
because that's when we tend to...
let our guard down. Right. We think, oh, I'm good. I've got this.
Yeah, I got this.
I don't need to worry.
And that's when those
And that's when the
subtle temptations
can kind of creep in.
Right. The ones that say, just this once.
Yeah, just this once.
You deserve it.
You deserve it.
No one will know.
No one will know.
So it's not about living in fear.
No.
But it's about
having that healthy awareness.
And having a healthy awareness
of our weaknesses.
And being prepared.
When temptation comes.
For those moments.
And she also talks about.
And seeking guidance, right?
Seeking guidance, yeah.
From those
who can help
us see those blind spots.
Well, right, because sometimes we need that outside perspective.
Sometimes we need
to see things clearly.
Yeah, someone else to point them out.
And then of course, prayer.
Prayer, yeah.
Not just as a way to ask for things.
Not just to ask for things.
Not just a lifeline.
But to really tap into that grace and that strength.
With God.
When you're feeling weak.
Yeah, when we're feeling weak, when we're tempted.
Yeah.
She saw prayer as this.
It's that ongoing
conversation,
Being honest, be vulnerable.
Bring your whole self. Bring your whole self to God.
Try to polish for
present this, perfect.
Yeah. It's got to be
real.
Got to be authentic, yeah.
And she believed in the power of.
And she also believed in the power of
praying for others.
Praying for others.
Praying for the community.
For the community.
As whole.
So that we're
all
interconnected.
Yeah,
and our prayers can actually create this
this web of support.
And healing.
Even if we don't see
the tangible result.
But she wasn't all about avoiding temptation.
Talked about the role of suffering.
She also talked about suffering.
It's inevitable.
Right, and the role
it's part of life.
Right, it plays.
But she didn't see it as
a punishment from God.
Not as a punishment.
No, she believed that.
But as an opportunity.
If we approach it
for growth,
with the right attitude,
for transformation,
that it can actually be a catalyst for.
So it's about finding meaning,
growth and transformation
in our pain.
Exactly. She compared it to
using it to a fire that refines gold.
Passion, our empathy.
It burns away.
Her understanding of God's love.
The impurities.
It's about finding.
And reveals the true beauty.
That silver lining.
So it's not about seeking out suffering. But when it comes
even the darkest experiences.
We can choose to see it.
Can hold the seeds.
As an opportunity to grow.
Of something beautiful.
And to learn.
And she also.
To draw closer to God.
Reminded us.
And she reminded us.
That we're not
alone in our suffering.
Alone.
Christ suffered all our suffering.
Christ suffered.
And he's with us.
And he's with us in our pain.
Offering us
comfort and strength.
So
it's about trusting.
That
God will see us through.
That he'll see us through.
Even when it's hard. And ultimately,
she believed that true freedom comes.
She believed that. Not from avoiding suffering.
True freedom comes. Not from avoiding suffering.
Surrendering to God's will.
From surrendering when it's painful.
To his will.
Even when it doesn't make sense.
Even when it doesn't make sense to us. It's letting go of control. And trusting
that
God has a plan.
That he has a plan.
It's a profound paradox, isn't it?
It is.
That surrendering control can lead to a deeper experience of freedom.
It's a paradox, but it requires a deep trust. In his goodness.
In God's goodness.
And love. But it's the only path she believed.
The only path to true and lasting
peace.
Well, exploring the wisdom.
Yeah.
This has been quite a journey.
Well, sure.
She's challenged me to think differently about.
She really
makes you think about the meaning of true freedom.
And even though she was writing.
And her insights.
Centuries ago.
She feels so relevant.
Her insights are.
For our lives today.
So relevant for us today.
So as we wrap up this deep dive.
Yeah.
What's one takeaway from St. Teresa's writings? Take with you.
Carry with you.
What resonated with you the most?
Yeah, what resonated most deeply?
I think for me, it's her emphasis on integrating action and contemplation.
Not
just living out our faith in tangible ways.
But also
creating that inner sanctuary.
Having that inner life.
Where we can
connect with God. With our true self.
And with your true self.
That's a beautiful takeaway.
Yeah.
And it's a good reminder.
It is.
That St. Teresa's wisdom
is
just about theory.
It's not just about theory.
But about living
a more intentional, compassionate, and ultimately
joyful life.
More joyful life.
Yeah.
Thanks for